Okay. Good evening, and thank you for joining the Prince George's County Historical Society's April 22nd, 2024 History Chat with Stephanie Fleming and myself as we chat about the history of Behnke's Nursery. And as Stephanie just reminded me, today is Earth Day, so this definitely seems to be an appropriate chat for Earth Day. As some of you know, I am the president of the Historical Society, and I would like to thank our members for joining us tonight. The Society is a membership and donation-based nonprofit, and we do not receive any local or state funding. If you are not already a member, please consider becoming one or making a donation to the Society so we can continue to keep history chats like tonight's free for everyone. We would appreciate it if you would mute your microphones. I think everybody has, or most everybody has. We do tape these history chats, and they will be posted on our YouTube channel, which can be reached through our website, www.pghistory.org. We will take questions at the end of the chat. Please put your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. Now to introduce you to our guest. Her name is Stephanie Fleming. She was raised at Behnke's Nursery in Beltsville. Her mom, Sonia, was one of Albert and Rose Behnke's 4 children. She was weeding from the moment she could walk and hiding as soon as she was old enough to run. So many weeds, so little time. Although she quickly learned how to pull out a perennial and was excused from weeding duty. I like that trick. When Sonia and her family moved away from Beltsville, Stephanie again found herself working for Walnut Springs Nursery, a wholesale grower in Howard County, Maryland. It was here that she met her husband, John. Together, they opened their own wholesale nursery, the Hillside Nursery. They were well known for supplying many garden centers and landscapers around the area with their annuals, pansies, mums, and poinsettias. They operated for 27 years while raising their 2 children. In 2007, Stephanie came to Behnke's to work full-time. John and Stephanie realized that their 80-hour work week lifestyle of greenhouse growers was more romantic in your 20s and 30s than in your 50s. Stephanie served as vice president of Behnke's until the nursery closed in 2019. During this time, she was the buyer for the Christmas shop and was a marketing advertising team member. Faced with the bittersweet decision to close the iconic 89-year-old garden center, Stephanie decided to rebrand Behnke's. Thus, Beyond Behnke's was born, a new chapter where she can share her passion for independent garden centers while keeping the gardening content from Behnke's website through her weekly blog and email. She also offers unique online gifts and attends many of the local craft shows and events. So welcome, Stephanie, and let's get started.
Well, thank you so much for having me tonight.
So who are the Behnke's founders?
Albert and Rose Behnke, my grandparents founded Behnke Nurseries. Albert started it a little sooner, and then he met my grandmother. And so we basically say the nursery started around 1930.
Okay. Did you want to start your presentation, or
Sure.
do you want to just keep going with the questions?
Sure. Let me go ahead and do this share screen. And I just want to tell everybody I'm not an expert at all this, but I have a slideshow that I'll talk about some of the pictures in it. And you're probably going to see me reading my notes because I'm a little nervous. But
that's completely understand.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go. And this is my grandfather, Albert Behnke. He's the little boy in the front. He was born in 1904 and grew up in the garden. His father, William Behnke, owned a nursery in the northern town of Kellinghusen, Germany, where he grew roses, perennials, and other flowers. William sold plants all over Europe and England. And this is some astilbe that they were cutting in bunches. And so as a young man in the 20s, Albert decided to go out on his own and create a new life for himself in America. And that's a picture of him on the boat. I don't know which trip, if it was going to or coming back or what. But before settling down in Beltsville, he worked at several jobs on the East Coast when he was over here in America, including working in the rose gardens of Bopkins and Atkins in New Jersey. He decided to go back to Germany and get a loan from his father so he could purchase the 1 acre piece of ground where the original office and the Behnke family home stood. He bought the land from Sims and Jones family, who developed Beltsville and owned a general store near the nursery. Let's see. And this is a picture of his speed wagon in 1931, and he's in front of the house he's in front of was Sally Lewis's house. It's still standing on Waikamaco. So while he was getting the nursery going, he rented a lot of the ground. And as the years went on, he started purchasing the different lots. And I think at the end, it was about 7 different lots that put together the whole over 12 acres that we knew as Behnke Nurseries. This is, like I said, this was the house that he rented when, before he had a house on the property, he lived there. My grandmother, Rose Hausner, grew up outside of Elling, a town in southern Germany. Her father was the mayor there, and her family owned the mill that ground the grain for the local farmers to raise hops for beer. And that's pretty much her mother and father, and her 6 siblings were there.
Which one is her?
I'm going to see if this works. I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, my uncle had pointed out that this was my grandmother. See that right here. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yeah. So this building is actually, from what I understood a couple years ago, I heard that it was put in the historic preservations or something in Germany. It's a pretty well-known building there with the mill. There's a picture of my grandmother as a young girl. She actually worked at a small nursery in her hometown, and when she was old enough, she went to Nuremberg to further her education. She was the only one of the Hausner girls to do so. She learned typing, shorthand, and other secretarial skills, but like Albert, she wanted more, and she decided to leave Germany. She found work as a governess for the Langer family and immigrated to New York. It was her job to teach their 2 young children French and German, and her lifelong love of traveling had started with this family because she got to go back and forth. And it was interesting. I was looking at her passport about a year or so ago, seeing all the back and forth and everywhere she went. She went everywhere with this family, so that was pretty cool. On a trip back home to Germany, Albert met Rose, and it was fate. They were both engaged to other people, and as my grandmother Rose would tell us, she saw this young man with the most beautiful manners who could really dance. They knew immediately they were meant for each other, and they broke off their engagements to the other people when they reached Germany. And so, like I said, I'm never sure on these pictures when they were taken, but that was Albert and Rose on the left, and then my grandmother posing up there on the right. Let's see, I'm on 9. Okay, they returned to America together and landed in New York on February 14th, 1931. They were married on July 9th in 1931 and began their lives together, running the nursery here in Beltsville. Albert knew that US 1, being the main road between Baltimore and Washington, would be a busy road with the public transportation lines that ran by the nursery. It would bring customers from miles around. He also knew this was going to be a great opportunity. So this picture, you can still see Sally Lewis's house way in the back here. And then this was his selling area. He had like a, this was in 1932. So it was a little bit bigger than his original one, but it's his, where he sold plants. Here's US 1, and then the train tracks were still further over. And this is also right here, the pond that he had dug out to help with watering the crops in the field. Let's see. The original name for the nursery. Whoa, sorry, I went too fast. Let me go back. Uh-oh, I knew this would happen. Let me get back here. Sorry, everybody.
That's fine.
I don't know what's going on. There it is. We'll go back here. All right, there's the original sign. It says Roses, Evergreens, Albert Behnke Nurseries was the original name. Once again, you can see Sally Lewis's house up there. Like I said, it's still standing. and there's the selling area. He planted everything in the ground. And once the sign was put up on US 1 or Route 1, as they called it, they were open for business.
So what is in the field? What is being grown? You know?
Those are some kind of shrub. And I'm going to go ahead and be real clear right now that Stephanie is the one Behnke that is not an expert on shrubs and trees and stuff like that. I'm pretty good with annuals, but I'm not very good with that stuff. But they look like some sort of little spruce tree. Okay, so I'm on slide 11. So later, in later years, when business wasn't so great, he would have the children stand alongside US 1 and wave their bouquets of flowers to try to get the traffic to come in. He was always up for different opportunities. The nursery faced some hard times in the early years. It was opened for business in 1930. Not only was this during the Depression, but Maryland was also suffering a prolonged drought. Business was really slow, so he and Rose took extra jobs to provide for themselves and their growing family. And let me get over here. There we are. Okay. Before Rose had the children, she worked at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers in Washington, D.C. During the same time, she also attended Strayer College in D.C., where she quickly learned the skills necessary to further her position from stenographer to secretary. She also assisted them with their in-house publication. All these experiences helped when advertising and other business-related tasks came up for their nursery. My grandmother handled all the advertising, marketing, and so much more at Behnke's. Horses were rented from a farmer, a local farmer nearby, to plow and cultivate the fields that grew their first crop of roses. And I think in the background right here is US 1, just to give you an idea of what's where. And this is their, in 1932, it's a picture of them working in the roses. They had them planted in the ground. Let's see. And this is the early sales area. I found a couple different ones. So this one right here is my grandfather standing in front, and he had his little selling area in the front. Here people were coming to shop, and I guess they were pointing out what they wanted, and he would dig them up. And there goes the cars on US 1. So I mean, we were right there on the road basically. And once again, here's the train going by and cars. And this looks like probably one of the little my uncle or somebody sitting in there doing something. Their first son, Roland, in the middle here, was born in 1932, followed by Sonia, my mother, in 1933, and William in 1934. Albert Jr. was born years later in 1948, and everybody had chores to do. So
like pulling weeds?
Like, yeah, I was fired from pulling weeds. But this is right on US 1 again. So here, two of the children and their selling area. And here we got Glads for 45 cents a dozen. So he did a lot of cut flowers back then. Here's my grandparents with, this would have been William, Roland, and my mother, Sonia. And here they are working, always having to either pose. My grandmother was a wonderful photographer and loved taking pictures. So she was always taking pictures. And we have such a large amount of pictures.
Yeah, that's great to be able to keep your history alive. Yeah.
I think so. I hope everybody keeps their pictures, even though it's digital now. It's good for people to be able to see. Everybody has a story to share. Here's my mother hanging laundry. She used to laugh because one time she got out there and started hanging up some things, and my grandmother came running out and saying, "Oh no, the unmentionables are out there. You have to put the sheets in front of the unmentionables." So she was had to learn quickly. Here's somebody putting, I guess, water or something in the radiator. And this is the killer tiller, which I have a feeling either Uncle Willie or Uncle Roland was posing. I can't imagine they were running that machine. Now, let's see, we're on slide 20. This is when I talked about they waved bouquets. Here's some pictures. That's my mother. And then my Uncle Albert there's a little boy. He's right here too. I put him up here. He's so cute. And here we are. These are, where am I at? And when the war ended, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. The family lived in a 4-bedroom house or 4-room house that Albert had converted from the original office. And so this is what you're seeing here was his original selling area, and he kind of made it their home. And they lived there for a few years. There was no running water in this house. And so I used to hear my Uncle Roland say when he got a little older, he had to pull it up in the wagon from the stream. He had to bring fresh water up. Okay, make sure I'm in the right spot. This is a little bit later as he added on to the house. It's my grandfather in front. And this house was kind of, if you're familiar with Behnke's in the Beltsville location where the garden shop was, it's about where the house was. And here it is in 1954. And by now, around 1945, they actually got running water. When the war ended, business started picking up. Albert was able to purchase a 1.5-ton Chevy stake body truck. So he was able to get a lot more work done. And they got the plumbing, like I said. Now Albert was also adding more and more greenhouses as time was going on. So here they are building greenhouses. So this greenhouse would be what we call the main selling area that was still there when we closed. It's where if you went to buy your shady annuals, where it would be, or the greenhouse you walk through to get to the Christmas shop. That's to give you a little idea of the location. And this wall was the doorway going into what we call the time clock room at the end. When I was a little girl, it was like the potting shed. So that's that. And I wanted to show you some aerial shots that we've had over the years. This one, I'm not sure of the year, but it was before the brick house was built that I grew up in. And that was built around 57, 58, somewhere around then. And it would have been right about here. So here's their house, and here's US 1, just to give you a little bit of idea. And this is a little later. So here's the brick houses here. And this is Wicomico, which in the 90s, I think it was 80s or 90s, they actually closed Wicomico off. Then this is the back road that came off of Howard and US 1 right here. And then the 2 ponds. This was the front pond. Here's US 1, here's the train tracks. And this was the back pond. And they used the water a lot to water all the plants and everything. Growing up, there would be spigots that would be painted red. So we knew not to drink out of them because it was pond water. Right here is the Beltsville Firehouse that is still there. And this is a few more years later. Things are, the ponds are still here. This pond, the back pond was eventually was closed first and became more parking lot for the nursery. And then the front pond was closed and became a selling area for our trees and evergreens. And then probably the last 10 or 15 years, it became like trial gardens, and we had display gardens, and we moved all the trees and evergreens over to the other side, what we called the north side. And then this was probably in the late 70s, 90s, because they hadn't closed this road off right here going to Wicomico, where they put what we called the mall. It just combined this side of the nursery to this side of the nursery. So let me find out where I am. So Behnke's was considered a year-round nursery. We never closed. We closed on Thanksgiving Day and New Year's Day and Christmas Day. Those were the only days that we were closed. In the winter, my grandfather would grow mums, and he would have them for cut flowers. So you can see them here. They had huge bunches of cut flowers he would have. And then they also grew, they were very famous for their poinsettias. So Albert aggressively promoted the fall planting of pansies, which was a European tradition. He developed his own seed blends and seedlings that were sold in the fall by bunches. And so in this picture, here, that's my mom's car, and this was parked right in front of our little brick house to give you bearings. So all this area over here is where, in the end, was the perennial benches and stuff. Well, these were the pansy beds. And a lot of work went into doing the pansies. You can see the guys over here doing them. They had to prepare the beds. They had, like, I believe a sand base go down, and that sand had to be sifted and sifted and resifted and resifted. It was this huge screen, and they would just put shovelfuls through it and then redo it because it had to be just right. And then I believe it was just my grandfather and then Ira DeGorsey, who was our next president or manager of the nursery. And then I think eventually Alfred got to do it. Carefully sowed by hand the seeds. They would throw them out. Then more layer of like soil or something got put on them. Then this white that you see is burlap that was wetted down. And then they would put snow fence over for shade. So a lot went into it. I love this picture. This is Mr. Steinley. He had a sign made, "Please do not talk to me while counting." And here comes my mother. She was probably yabbering away. There was always something to be said. And so he had his sign. And because it was very important to count just the right amount of seedlings that would go into these flats. And you can see them for sale over here. They were little bunches. I think it was at that time 50 it was like a strawberry pack, a quart pack. Here's young Ludi Schneider. I believe this is Ludi. I'm not sure for sure, but there they are counting them. Once again, Ludi lived right up the street from Behnke's. He still does. He worked for us. He was a good friend of my uncles and my mom. And then he eventually went on to become the head gardener at the White House. So I guess he developed a love of it. And, you know, there was a other reason that my grandparents, and if I slip, I call them Oma and Opa, which is German for grandmother and grandfather. But they also settled in Beltsville because there was a lot of German families there at the time. I think that's why he picked it. She wasn't around when he decided that was the area. Okay, so now why do I have turkeys in this presentation? So this is a photo of the Beltsville small white turkey breed that the United States Department of Agriculture Research Center in Beltsville bred from 1934 to 1941. The idea was to create a bird that would answer the consumer's demand for the turkey that would fit in small refrigerators for apartment dwellers, in small ovens, and feed smaller families. The Beltsville variety started being used in the 40s and was recognized by the American Poultry Association in 1951. The Beltsville small white also helped with the development of other strands of medium and small white turkeys. Today, the Beltsville small white is quite rare, and only a few exposition breeders have them. A research flock exists in the Iowa State University, but the public has no access to them. Why are they here? Well, Albert got to help raise them, and they were running around on the nursery property. That's my Uncle Will in the background. He probably was getting to feed them or something like that. Here's another interesting thing that sadly happened quite often. Cars trying to run the train, got to get over the little passway. That's my mother right here looking suitably horrified. Nobody was injured in this accident, I was told. They all got out. The car just was destroyed. And sadly, this happened many times. This is the pond in 1960. This would have been the front pond. I love the ponds. I was there a lot. We had ducks and swans, and we could go fishing. Unfortunately, there was also snapping turtles, so we didn't go swimming. I think my mom and her brothers swam there, and they had like a canoe or something when they were kids, and they ice skate on it. We were always told growing up we couldn't go out on the ice because they would break up a lot of it in the front for the ducks and swans. But I know my brothers, you know, he knows we would tempt fate and try to slide out on there, and then we'd get in trouble. But it was a great place. They had picnic tables. People would come to the nursery. There was a playground off to the side, and they would bring their picnic lunch and then also go shopping. Belgian Giants is something else that Behnke's was pretty famous for. There was a big pink tomato. in the past, I dreaded this time of the year when, as a little girl, it was all about the famous Belgian giant tomatoes that my grandfather grew. I think that's why I never liked tomatoes. We would have to squish them. They would let them rot in these barrels, and then we'd have to squish them through these screens to try to get the seeds. And there was only a couple seeds in each tomato plant, and it was pretty bad, especially if you had cuts on your fingers or anything. So, but according to Albert Behnke, there was only one tomato worth growing and eating, and that was the Belgian giant. For many years, I thought he'd actually developed the tomato, but then I was reading some of his paperwork and stuff, and he got the seeds from a gardener in the Midwest, and he just really liked them. It was sometime in the mid-60s when he would plant hundreds of these tomatoes at his home in Burtonsville. My stepfather, Joe Festerling, said that he would have to get 16-foot long 2x4s and sink them in the ground. Each plant had lime and cow manure mixed around the surrounding soil. A bale of hay was spread around to help with the moisture, and they could get up to 12-foot tall. The Belgian giant plants, here's a picture of my brother, John Peter, and my one of my cousins and my grandfather picking the crops. As you can see, they were pretty prolific. Let's see. They would sometimes weigh between 2 and 5 pounds. And we pretty much sold them. They were the best-selling tomato, even up to a couple of years. I mean, we stopped growing them. I think when we closed our Largo location, they stopped selling them. But they were pretty cool. This is another favorite picture of mine I wanted to put in here. This is my grandmother, Rose Behnke, the woman behind the man who did it all. She was marketing, advertising, payroll, hiring, did the bills, answered the phone, cashiered, you name it, she did it. And he was pretty much gave her, he would say, without, your grandmother, there wouldn't probably have been a Behnke Nurseries, because she kept the machine rolling. So we wanted to talk a little bit about African violets. So a neighbor that my mom would spend time with as a little girl gave her a violet called Blue Boy. Her parents, my grandparents, thought this little plant was wonderful, and after a lot of research, they began selling them, and Rose became involved with the hybridization of the plants, developing the Behnke Boy and Washington Star varieties, among many others. And so what you're looking at here, this was right outside. So if you're familiar with where houseplants was at the end, in front of it was the what we call the violet room or something, and that was the potting shed where they would pot all the little plants. These pictures are the benches that were in the original greenhouses that the houseplant house that everybody knows of now replaced. And underneath it was peat moss underneath it. So when people would pick up the plants, they'd break off the leaves and they would fall underneath, and all of a sudden we had these little plants growing all over the place. But my grandmother really wanted to keep the varieties known. It was very important. So one of my jobs, once I could write legibly, we had wooden labels, and I had to write the names and everything. She actually made a hybridized one called a Steffi, and it was a light pink ruffle. It was a very poor performer, so it was thrown away. Not good. So anyhow, but I loved her sign, no self-service. And back here was all the stock ones that they did cuttings with. So Rose Behnke loved to travel. They would go out west every summer, and she always would pack 1 or 2 dozen violets to give to the nursery she would stop at. They would visit their friends. They would stop out in the Black Hills. And so there she is holding one. On the right is my mom at 17. She made the front page of the Washington Star magazine holding the violets. That's just a special picture. I have a couple clippings of it, and I have it framed. So I really do like that. So, I wanted to say, my grandmother also became nationally famous as an African violet breeder and grower. They did a big mail order business for African violets. And when we closed in 2019, the American African Violet Society in Arizona reached out to me. And I ended up sending them a lot of her records and stuff for their museum out there. Another thing that my grandmother did from starting with Bess Truman and ending with Nancy Reagan, as she would send a selection of violets to the White House, welcoming the new First Lady. And she kept all the thank you notes in the envelopes. I have the album. I love this album. So I don't think you can see it. So anyhow, I put a copy of one. This was from Bess Truman, and they had a lot of communications going back and forth, where she would write that they were going home, and they were taking the train, and that they wrapped their violets up very carefully. So it was a lot of conversations going back and forth, but I think it's special, that these first ladies and some of the presidents actually had, probably their secretaries sent a thank you note to her. So then we go on to the Christmas shop. My mom, Sonia, started the Christmas shop in the late 60s by convincing her father that a few German decorations would sell. In the beginning, it was located in the African violet house that I showed you earlier, where that potting bench was. And it was a dirt floor. It was kind of dark. And I remember just a few things, and we had baskets of ornaments and stuff. But I remember a little bit about Mom. She would get the stuff early and be pricing them in our house. We lived in that little brick house on the nursery. There's a picture. I'm pretty sure this picture here was in the violet house. I'm just never really sure for sure. But you can see that they had a lot of stuff. They would make the lights up in the roof, and they had the little baskets full of ornaments. This is Mom standing in front of one of her trees. She became, as the years went by, she started doing just the decorating of the trees. And over here, they have all the nutcrackers. They had pyramids. They did a lot of that. If you have a nutcracker in your house, maybe it came from Behnke's. So as the Christmas shop, it became one of the only Christmas shops in the area, that it was a true Christmas shop. After a few years, my Uncle Roland's wife, Ellie Behnke, joined my mom in creating a destination for people to go to get that special ornament, nutcracker or pyramid, along with their poinsettias, Christmas trees, and wreaths. It was one-stop shopping at its best. Ellie had a crew of ladies that would price these ornaments by hand all summer long. When they moved everything from the Violet House across what we call the street, which was, that enclosed green area, they built that one long area where the Christmas shop, if you're familiar, ended up, and they would black everything out, and it became this experience. So it would be secret. Only people that were helping build it inside and the pricing saw what was going on until they opened up, and people would be lined up for miles the day they would open it up. So it was always a lot of fun. We were a Gold Key member for Department 56, which sold all those little houses. And so that was great. And of course, we were very famously known for our Behnke bow that people would come and have us make for their wreaths and decorations. So this is a picture of the poinsettias and me and my mother and me. I'm this little one right down here, and that's my mom. Okay, so I'm sure some of your guests here have been to the Behnke's Oktoberfest. In the 80s, we decided to honor our German heritage by holding an Oktoberfest. This was a family-friendly event, had everything from Bavarian dancers, food, train gardens, the Christmas shop, games for the kids, pumpkin, pony rides, mazes, and all sorts of else. And this was some of the, I call it the Papa band, but they would perform, they would dance, and people would watch, and it was always so much fun. And this is my grandfather dressed up to watch. He enjoyed it. He'd actually get up on the stage and dance. And so it was always a lot of fun there. And then we're going to go over here. You asked me, one of the questions was about family members involved. Well, here's my uncles and my mom helping my grandfather standing up there building one of the early little greenhouses. I'm not quite sure where that one was located, but I always thought that was kind of an interesting picture. Here's my mom holding one of the wooden flats. They actually made these flats out of wood. And this is my Uncle Roland here and my grandfather. This is number 47. So Roland, Sonia, William, and Albert Jr. were all raised in that little house that I mentioned before. And I think I'm ahead of myself, but all 4 children worked at Behnke's through their teen years, so they each left home to pursue other careers. My mom, Sonia, came back to Behnke's to work full-time in the 60s, and we lived in that little brick house on the property till the 70s when she and my stepfather moved to Western Howard County. Roland, after retiring from the Air Force, also returned to Behnke's to work full-time. He served as president of the company till he retired, and then my mother took over till her retirement. My brother, John Peter, and I, along with Roland's children, Jeannie, Mark, and Carl, we all worked at Behnke's during our childhood and our teen years. That was where we worked. I one time thought people would say, oh, you got a job because you're Behnke. And so I decided I was going to go work, get my own job. And I went up the road and got a job at Burger Chef. That was a disaster. And so that didn't last too long. And I came back to Behnke's where I belonged and knew what was going on. So this is my Uncle Roland, and that's my mom. My Albert and Rose's grandsons, Mark Behnke, this is Mark, that's Roland's son. My brother, John Peter, right here, who many of you probably know, and Mike Behnke, my Uncle Willie's son out in California, all served as past Behnke presidents. I came back to Behnke's after closing my husband and my wholesale nursery in 2007, and I stayed till we closed in 2019. While many family members were part of Behnke's history, the nursery would not have been the amazing place it was without the hard work of so many others. And this is a picture of Ira DeGorsey. He was a partner and president, and he worked from 1955 to 1980 until he retired. This is Leo Beeknes. He came from Holland. He started in 1956 and became our head grower and went on to be vice president and a partner in 1961 until he retired. Many of you I probably might remember Helmut. Helmut Janigan came to Behnke's in 1961 from Germany. He became our woody plant manager and buyer. He retired, although we're not sure if he really did. He was known to be at the nursery to the day we closed. Helmut has been a longtime member of the Beltsville Garden Club for many, many years. Both Leo and Helmut, along with my stepfather, Joachim Festerling, or Joe as we called him, were but a few of the men that came to work or apprentice for my grandparents from Germany and Holland, and most of them ended up living in our basement. Hank Doon, at age 14 in 1970, he came to work for us and went on to become the head grower for annuals and poinsettias, and ended his time in 2019 as our CFO. Hank was one of a few students that one year Ira asked my brother, John Peter, if there were any kids at High Point High School that would like a job. He asked that they make good grades and could add. Many of those kids, like Hank, went on to stay with Behnke's for many years, while others went to have other careers in the nursery business. Alfred Millard started at the age of 13, and he went on to become the last president of the Behnke Nurseries, where we closed in 2019. After holding many other positions, he actually, I think he held every position the nursery had. He's a longtime resident of the area, and now he's enjoying retirement. There's an early picture of some of the staff. This is my Uncle Roland over here as a young boy, my grandfather. This is my mom right here, and I don't know everybody else. If Ludi Snyder's watching, he probably could name them all. So some of these people that worked for us over the years went on to have wonderful careers, some at the White House, the Vice President's residence, the National Arboretum, the Smithsonian Gardens and their greenhouses. We have horticulturists at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, the architect of the Capitol, and there's a horticulture consultant at the University of Maryland Home and Garden Information Center. So a lot of people stayed in this business, or when they left the nursery, they found wonderful jobs. Many others went on to start their own independent garden centers or landscape companies. A few of those are Metzler's and Rosen's. and then Homestead Gardens. Don Riddle worked for us as a young man. The list goes on to include many others that made Behnke's what it was. I would say Behnke's employed hundreds, if not thousands, of students for their first jobs, along with adults looking for full and part-time work. My mom, Sonia, created the Behnke logo, or as we refer to it as the Behnke Bee. Mom was always a wonderful artist, and apparently one day, while goofing off, doodling around, my grandfather asked her to create a logo. Do something constructive, he said, and the Behnke logo was born. It stayed on with the nursery, and I've kept it on when I rebranded the company Beyond Behnke's. And so these are some of the signs that were at the nursery, and as you can see, there's the Behnke Bee. My Aunt Kathy in California made this for my grandparents, this etched Behnke Bee. Sadly, when we closed, I went to mail it back to her, spent all this money, and UPS, they packed it. They said they'd pack it great, and they broke it. So that was such a shame. And
Is the boy somebody in the
it was just
family
something,
or just
no,
some
it's just
random?
something she doodled and came up with it. And I just found out my Uncle Albert, the young one, he said he didn't realize it was actually a boy. He thought it was a backwards 3 with some doodle marks there. I'm like, really? So, but yeah, that's the Behnke boy. He's like, you can see, I'm sitting here pointing. He's got a little shovel and I guess a piece of hay or something sticking out of his mouth. I didn't know, but it was cute and it stayed. So, and this was, we had a fella that decided that Route 1 was a speedway one night, and he ended up in our sign, our older sign out on US 1, and destroyed it. And it's a beautiful sign. What are we going to do? So Alfred, who was our president at the time, commissioned a company up in Maine, I think it was, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, to make this. And it was like 3D, and his daughter-in-law painted it. In our graphics department, they came up with the design, and it was absolutely beautiful. And it was 2 pieces back to back hanging on US 1 till we closed. And when we had the auction at the end, both of them were sold. I'm not sure where they went, but somebody has them. So that's the Behnke Bee. There's my grandparents in retirement. They when they retired, they built their dream home in Burtonsville in 1965. And this is them in front of their gardens. But of course, nurserymen never retire. So Albert kept adding on trial gardens and grew many of the nursery stock. And this was his backyard. And people would drive and they'd be able to, drive through here, have a self-guided tour, or sometimes, most of the time, he was out there and he would show them things. Everything was labeled. And he had a full staff basically working with him. He'd call up Ira and say, send me some guys up here. I need help. Or I need a couple thousand bulbs, or I need this and I need that. And up they went. And you can see there are the blue spruces and all sorts of things there. So a lot of people got to work there. I'm not sure how much fun they had working for him because he could be a hard taskmaster. Like I said, I learned early, just pull the perennials out and you get fired. And I got to go in and help my grandmother cook. It was a lot easier. These are 2 pictures that I've always loved about them. I thought it would be good remembering them. This was a picture my grandfather taken at an Oktoberfest by the gazebo. And then here's my grandmother looking up at the sky, probably getting ready to travel someplace wonderful. So, and this is, I found this picture from 2014. Someone had done had a drone or something and went over the nursery and did like a little video. And if you Google Behnke's aerial or something, 2014, you can see it was pretty cool to watch it. It was kind of sad, but this shows that coverage. This is this thing that we call the mall, that we connected both sides of the nursery to each other. And then these became the test gardens. And as you see, the ponds are gone. There's my little brick house. And of course, that leads us to the last day, which was June 15th, 2019. When the last customer left, the staff that was there, we all went down and they had this picture taken. And so We decided to close Behnke Nurseries. It was closed on June 15th, 2019. After making the decision a few years before, many reasons went into this, and while it was heartbreaking, it was time. After 89 years and millions of memories, we started telling our employees about 2 years before we told the public. The support we got from them was unbelievable, and pretty much everyone that could stayed with us till the end. Once we made the announcement to the public, we were overwhelmed with the love and support from so many people. Our other garden centers in the area reached out to let us know that they would hire any one of our staff that wanted a job with them. I thought that was so nice. And of course, with the announcement, there were sales. It was springtime in Maryland and people needed their plants. Within the first week, we knew we needed more inventory than we had if we were going to be able to stay open to June. So we ended up restocking the garden center over 4 times, mostly with just plants, but even Alfred ended up getting statuary in 2 or 3 times. It was unbelievable. The people that were just coming and wanting something, just they needed something. We knew that there were going to be fixtures would need to be sold, and we figured we would have an auction in July, which we ended up having. But on that first day, we found people wanted everything, from our benches to the bricks in the ground, even the tulips that were coming up that spring. People were saying they wanted it. And so we quickly made up a system where our staff got first choice, and then we started selling everything. And this was very hard on all of us, the staff and myself, Alfred, all of us. It was very hard. But I think I'm very proud of all the money that we raised from selling the fixtures. We put it in an account. And at the end, all the employees that were still with us got a part of it, and we just split it up with the employees. We had a wonderful closing event for current and former Behnke employees the day after we closed. We had a big outdoor picnic there at the empty garden center. And so many people came from all over the country to say goodbye and share memories. Even now, many still get together, and they have one of them has formed a private Behnke alumni group on Facebook for those that have worked for us. And so that's pretty much the story. I probably left some things out.
Oh, that was great, and you know, it definitely Behnke's is definitely a family business based, not only the family itself, but all your employees who became family over the years. So that's wonderful, and thank you, Stephanie. So we do have a bunch of questions. So let me
I'll do my
start.
best.
Okay, or maybe comments and questions. Clayton Carl says, love the presentation. I must leave early, but would love to see the recording.
My dentist, the family dentist. Well, actually, his dad was our dentist.
Angela Porter says, do you still have seeds available for the tomatoes? No.
No, they're gone.
Mark Tomasoni, what's going on with the land now? Who owns the property? And let's see, he's got several questions. So how about what's going on with the land and who owns the property?
Well, right now, from what I understand, 7-Eleven has a portion of it and Ryder's in the other portion. I'm not sure what the third portion is going to be.
Okay. What was the best year financially that Behnke's had?
Oh, I don't know that answer at all. I would say the 90s were probably the best. The 80s and 90s were the best financially.
So how many full-time workers did you have during the summer versus the winter?
Well, the spring is when we had the most people. We would ramp up late February, start hiring, and then by June, letting everybody go. Usually 1 or 2 people, teenagers would be stand out or something. We couldn't keep everybody because there just wasn't the sales to justify it. So how many employees just really, I'm sitting here watching my cat go after something. It just depended really, but in the spring it would be over 100 people. And of course, we had other locations, so that added too. We had a place in Largo, and then we had a place in Lothian, and we had Potomac.
Okay. Lynn Roberts asked, how did your family deal with advertising, and how was it managed?
So my grandmother, of course, did all the advertising in the beginning, And then when my mom came back in the 60s, she helped my grandmother. My grandfather always have to approve. And we had books and books, huge, big books that they kept every ad they ever did. And some of my cousins actually took the books from their birth year and wanted to keep them. But yeah, they did it. They would talk. They did the yellow pages. They did radio years later. They just did it all. So, and then when mom retired, or even before, I think my brother John Peter, he could answer that more clearly, but he was in the advertising. And then there was more of a team was formed. When I got there, I kind of, jumped in on that.
Okay. So Kathy Bryan has 2 comments for Stephanie. However, she didn't put them in there, so I
Okay.
can't share them. But so
No, wanted to, Stephanie, I wanted to tell you that I was your very, very, very last customer.
Oh, you were?
And I was, and you did a recording of me and you asked me to make comments, but I was so stunned. I didn't say everything I wanted, and I wanted one big observation I had of my life. I spent most of my life at Behnke's, and
Good.
when I would go there when I was sad or depressed, and it would make me so happy. And then when I was happy, I would go there and the flowers just lifted my spirits. But my aunt Kitty Smith always took me over there. And I have to be honest, a couple weeks ago, one of my neighbors told me she had planned to get cremated and spread her ashes at Behnke's, but now she can't do that. So she's glad she didn't do it, but she's still alive.
I think that's against the law, don't you?
Yeah, anyway, it was a funny thing. I thought you'd like to know, but that's how much it meant to all of us. It just, the place meant so much. I was devastated. I spent thousands of dollars there the last month. You're welcome, because,
One thing I always loved is when I would sit at the counter up at the information, and you could see people coming in at lunchtime on their lunch break, and they look all tense, and they would walk in, take a deep breath, and you could just see their shoulders relax, and it was great.
And one more comment I thought you'd like to know. Around 2002, well, in 2000, Donna Schneider and I did our book, Arcadia book on Prince George's County. And then because of that, John Peter Thompson, who's a good friend of mine, still your brother,
Yes.
he wanted me to meet up with your mother, and we met in the upper floor of where I think the indoor plants were, or no, next to across that little alley. But anyway, it was at one of those buildings, the upper, and John Peter did a slideshow of Behnke's, of Beltsville and Behnke's way back in the early days, and for a couple hours, and talked, and it was just incredible. It was an incredible experience. So
yeah, a lot of these pictures were some of the ones he put together. I was surprised you all asked me and not him.
Anyway, thank you for everything your family did and you did. You've enriched my life and made me so happy. A large part of my garden in Old Town College Park is mostly Behnke's, and I walk around and look at the plants and say, oh, this came from Behnke's, and it's just still enriching my life. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. And someone started when we closed a hashtag called Born at Behnke's, and they put in pictures of their yard of stuff that was from Behnke's. So go ahead and share that on social media.
So Oscar Gregory is asking, what's the story behind Kilroy?
I don't know.
Okay. And then he said, the German migration from Philadelphia in the 1700s came through Frederick County to the Shenandoah. Why did Behnke start in Prince George's County? Why Beltsville?
Well, as I said, he came in up in New York through Ellis Island, and he, I guess, worked his way through on the Eastern Shore and stuff. And he was in New Jersey, and he worked at a lot of different places. And Beltsville had a pretty good sized German immigrant community there, and I guess he felt comfortable there. He noticed that road, that US 1 was going to be a good road, and I guess he just saw the opportunity.
Okay. So at the moment, that's the last of the questions in the chat. But other than like the violets that your grandmother grew, were there any other plants that or varieties that started with Behnke's?
Oh, sure. And once again, John Peter would probably have more details on that, but there was some hibiscus that a gentleman, and oh gosh, his name is escaping me, but he hybridized the Lord Baltimore and Lady Baltimore. Oh, I can't think of his name. I feel really bad about that. But he's the one who developed that. There was Midnight Rose, which is coral bells. There's daylilies that my grandfather, I don't think he actually hybridized them, but he had trial gardens and he got to name them, and he named one Steffi Fleming. There's a Jeannie Burns Behnke after my cousin. There's Evangeline Bruce. So, oh, that was a rose. I'm getting myself mixed up right here. So there's different things.
Oh, great. I think you covered all the questions I had, so that's great.
Good.
And we're right at 8 o'clock. So thank you, Stephanie, for tonight's chat. We're looking forward, I'm sure people are looking forward to being able to see it again. And as I said, it will be on our YouTube channel. So thank you again.
And they can find me at Behnke's.com. We kept the website going. All the information's there. I do send out an email once a week on Thursdays. I talk about growing up Behnke's. I talk a little bit about everything. And we have a couple of our horticulturalists will still write for me and answer questions.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, Stephanie, and have a good night, everybody.